Hi, everybody. My name's Nick Benders, and I'm here to kick off the Digital Moments of Truth track. Here we are. Rattle, rattle. The first things first. Oops. I am not an investment advisor. You'll probably get this impression shortly anyway. I am the chief architect at New Relic. And they asked me to do the Digital Moments of Truth track. I said, yes, absolutely, because I love talking to customers. I love talking about customers and looking at your success. But I did have a little bit of a question, which was, what is a digital moment of truth? How do we even frame this question? And so we look at, for New Relic, what makes a moment? To New Relic, that moment of truth is when you're launching your business or a major new product for the first time, when you're releasing a key feature, or you're facing a deadline. You've got that Black Friday rush of traffic. You've got the election they talked about there in the keynote. That's a moment of truth when all the eyes are on you. Or maybe it's a sporting event. You're running an ad at the Super Bowl, and you want to make sure that all that money you spent to get that commercial are driving users to a website that is up and ready for them. What makes these moments special is that in each one of these moments, the results matter amplified. It's more than ever this is the time when you have to make that right decision, and you have to make it quickly and confidently. And to do that, you have to have the right information. And this is why the moment of truth matters so much to New Relic and to the whole way that we think about our product, the way that we've built our features, and that we run our own operation is to support this idea. So I went back kind of thinking about my career, both at New Relic and before, and about the moments of truth that I had faced. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about those, but also to give you a framework for how we think about these. And when I looked at my moments of truth, they fell into these three categories: crisis, or a challenge, or an epiphany. And a crisis is your site is on fire, right? You've either had that huge traffic burst that you weren't expecting, or some piece has fallen over. It's not doing the right thing. You've got all the leadership is there kind of around your desk. They're like, please make the computers run. You've got to move fast. A challenge, this is, Gannett was talking about this. Eric said, thing with the election is you see it coming. You know there's a date. We are going to rise to this challenge. We are going to run that Super Bowl commercial. We're going to cover the election. We're going to launch a fabulous new product. An epiphany, when suddenly you understand something that you didn't understand before. And by understanding it, you are able to transform part of your business, your technology, your product, just by looking at things in a new way. And once I started categorizing these and thinking about the structure of moments, it reminded me of this is the Cynefin framework. This is something Dave Snowden put together a long time ago. This is a framework for understanding different situations for problem solving. And so you'll see this used a lot in business, but it also has a lot of currency in agile software and in operations. And so just kind of to quickly walk a little bit through Cynefin at a very high level. The idea behind Cynefin is that in order to follow the right pattern, you have to first understand your situation. You can classify situations into one of these four modes. A simple situation is one in which best practices exist, so there are known knowns, essentially. So all you have to do is you start by sensing, you look around, you categorize, you say, well, what exact situation am I in? And then I just follow the best practices, and you can get out of that situation, or you succeed at it. Complicated situations are one in which a best practice could be developed, but you don't have it yet. So again, start by sensing, look at what's out there, analyze it, figure out how you're going to respond, and then respond. So those are kind of the easy sides of the equation. On the complicated side, we have a complex situation. This is one in which an answer may not even be knowable. This is a problem that has no one solution. In these situations, you need to start by probing. You run little experiments. You just make little slight disturbances in the system, see what comes back, develop that model, sense the results, and then respond. Or a chaotic situation. This is one that is dangerous to you or to your business, to whatever problem you're trying to solve. Things are decaying rapidly. The most important thing to do if you're in a chaotic situation is to act. You have to start running if there's a crisis. You can't just wait. And then, as you're running, see what the result of that immediate action was and respond. And we can think of the moments of truth as being similar to this, and using not this exact framework, but this idea of categorization and understanding the right pattern of behavior. We can look at things like our crisis. In the crisis, quick action is required. If the site is down, the most important thing to do is not to understand why, it's to get it back, is to figure out what needs to be done and just start doing it. And so take quick action. No chance to plan. You can analyze as you go, but you're not sitting back and saying, well, I think we're going to do this. And as you are taking this action, you have to build that mental model of why you think the site is down, why you think that the product isn't selling, or that the customers are angry, whatever the crisis is that you have, and iterate on that. This is a little note I took in our product back in November of 2014 as I was preparing the retrospective for an incident, or really a small series of incidents that involved one of our own crises. So this will probably look familiar to people. You see that mice barely visible at this y-axis, all of your normal behaviors of your product, and then there's this huge spike in request queuing. And the request queuing spike up into the seconds tells us two things. One, anytime our response time on the back end is measured in seconds, you're in big trouble. This is clearly not functioning. And two, because it's request queuing, it means that all of the workers are blocked. It's not doing anything useful. It's just waiting. And so all your worker threads are blocked, and it's just piling up requests. Everything is taking forever to wait through, and then getting processed relatively quickly once it gets to the front of the line. Classically, this is going to be a database or some other external dependency. So let's dig into the database. We look at the database. We can see throughput to the database, relatively constant in yellow there. Response time in blue with a huge spike. So it's not that we suddenly got more load. It's that we got worse at handling it. Maybe we threw a disk out of the RAID set. That's burned me more than once. Nope. I/O, if we look at the server stats, I/O went down, not up. So again, it's not that the system has become harder to, or it's doing more work. It's doing less work. It's just whatever it's doing is just jamming it up. At this point, we knew we were probably facing a logical database failure, not a physical database failure. So jump over to the MySQL stats. MySQL shows us, sure enough, a giant increase in the number of two particular mutexes on here. It says kernel mutex, which is just this kind of catch-all bucket of things that can go wrong in MySQL, and then a log flush mutex, which is similarly useless to diagnose. But it did tell us this is a soft problem in the database. We restarted the database, and it cleared up. And so edge to edge, we have about 8 minutes on this incident from that kind of initial spike on the attack to once we cleared it off onto the decay. Quick action got us out of here. It didn't tell us what was wrong, really. It told us kind of vaguely where it was. And you see as we iterated our model as we worked through this. So when we're in a crisis situation, what we want to do is, use quick and broad views. You're not trying to go super deep into this. You don't want to develop that type of intricate understanding. What you need to do is find the problem area. You got to have fast feedback. We needed to know within a few minutes, did the fix work? Ideally, we want to know within a few seconds. Like, the faster that you can get that feedback, the better. And we had to answer questions that we didn't know we were going to have at the beginning. We had to trace this thing through several applications, looking at databases, physical and logical. And so what was important here was kind of whatever our instrumentation had done out of the box. We didn't have time to set up any custom monitoring or to really get fancy. Now, after this was resolved, once the site was back up, we could go in and do that. And actually, we did. I picked this out of the hat because I had really good screenshots from it. But I actually remember this incident personally also. This was when I was the director of site engineering at New Relic. And as soon as I saw these charts, I was like, oh yeah, adaptive hash index. Because we went back later with that targeting. We said, well, it's somewhere in the mutex. And we were able to then do really detailed thread dumps and kind of dig into MySQL and look at some blogs. And one of our engineers said, I figured it out. And sure enough, if you disabled that feature, which gave us no performance boost anyway because of the size of our working set, then we've stopped the problem from recurring. So the final kind of resolution on this, the root solution, was not something that we did in the crisis, but rather something that we could do afterwards. And that time element of having time to prepare and to figure out what you're doing is key to the difference between a crisis and a challenge. A challenge, something, right? This is the anticipation of Super Bowl traffic as opposed to the handling of Super Bowl traffic. And the main difference here is that you might have days or weeks or months to prepare for this event. And so you have lots of time to find a strategy, to pick how you're going to deal with this. And you probably already have a model. Your boss said, I need you to make sure that the site will handle 20 times its normal load. Or, we're launching this new product, is it going to launch successfully? So you've established some type of mental model for why you think that that's true. And what you need to be doing is finding a way to verify it. So when we launched Insights, this was an audacious product launch for us. It wasn't the first new product we had launched. Since the start of New Relic with APM, we had added browser monitoring, mobile monitoring, server monitoring. We had expanded our portfolio. But all of those things had been built on the same technical underpinnings. They all used the same data pipeline and the same concept of agents report data in 1-minute aggregates. We square up those aggregates to kind of quantize them. We store them using a hierarchical namespace. Everything is written in a way that's indexed to make it as readable as possible. We knew the performance of that system. We'd been running it for years. Insights is totally different. It threw all of that out because in Insights, we were building a system that would take raw individual transactions, not the count of transactions, transmit those to us as individual events, store them as individual events with arbitrary naming keys, and then be able to query them in an ad hoc manner with no indexing as to what types of queries we were going to run. So it's a totally different concept. It used a totally different tech stack. It has the New Relic database and our DB, which we built ground up internally, totally from scratch system, although everyone says don't write a database from scratch. It turns out people also say things like don't query billions of events per second in production. And so if you want to do one, you might have to do the other. But we needed a way to launch this and to launch it confidently. So the first thing we did was figure out a way to bring a little bit of this value to customers without the whole thing. And we introduced a feature called histograms and percentiles, which you see in the APM page here. This, we discovered while we were working on Insights that you could use this data to get these beautiful and useful histograms of your application performance. But it doesn't say the word Insights on it anywhere, and so we could kind of introduce this one feature without the whole arbitrary query aspect. But even this is a pretty bold move too. We say, well, instead of just turning a arbitrary feature on for maybe a few dozen early access users. We're talking about turning on a fixed feature, but for thousands of customers. So in order to get our confidence doing this, we actually launched this feature completely dark for a long time. And we built out that data ingest pipeline to capture all those transactions, the storage system to store them and process them, the query side, and even the JavaScript that goes in the browser that would fetch the data for the histogram, prepare the chart, and then we just threw it away. And instead what we did is we measured that system, and we had custom instrumentation to look at how many events were we successfully ingesting at these phases, what was the response time and the result of the query from the browser. And we turned this live without any users knowing it was there, but all of your browsers were running this load test for us. And of course, when we first turned it on as early as possible, it failed as spectacularly as possible, and we lost maybe 99.5% of the data in an average day. But that's okay, because no one was looking at it anyway. And week by week, we just ground on this, and we improved the ingest until the ingest rate was stable, and we could capture all of the events we needed for our customers. We kept working on the operations plan until we could deploy without disrupting that ingest pipeline. We worked on the query side and on the APIs and the language, and finally, could just measure the performance end to end and look at how the system ran. And so by the time we turned this on to customers, let alone by the time we turned on the general insights product to customers, we had complete confidence it was going to work. It had been running essentially in production for months by the time that our users saw it. And all that time, we were able to do that because we had built this model. We said, we think this is going to work. Turns out we were wrong. We had to iterate our model. But instead of relying on users telling us that things were broken, we hid it from the users, and we relied on our instrumentation to tell us whether or not things were working. And so we can see here the plan of action in the challenge was, use that time that you're given. Configure and customize your instrumentation. Build, whole technical experiments, but also build instrumentation experiments. Figure out how to look at the things that are going to matter. And the detailed instrumentation is important. When we were going from dropping all the data to capturing all the data, that was a lot of time spent looking at thread profiles, a lot of time spent looking at very technical pieces of information. And the team would just look at this week after week and figure out how to optimize. And we had to understand our bottlenecks. It didn't do us any good to improve the query side if the data wasn't going in. And the data side was all managed by the constraint bottlenecks in it. You could improve most of the system with no effect. The only thing that mattered is finding that the piece with the lowest capacity and improving that capacity. The third kind of moment that I want to talk about is the Epiphany. And the Epiphany is a little bit different than the other moments. Whereas the challenge and the crisis are separated in their time dimension, with how much time you have to respond and to think about it. The Epiphany is about outcomes. Really, although we strive for greatness when we face that challenge or when we pull out of crisis or avoid a crisis, really the best we're doing there is avoiding. It's to meet the challenge that has been given to us. So the best thing you can do when you have that Black Friday sale is to successfully serve all of those orders quickly, right? The Epiphany is about upside and not about avoiding downside. It's looking for that moment of truth that if you fail at it, it just passes you by. You don't even know that that opportunity has passed. But if you succeed in this moment, it can change the way that you think about your user, think about your technology or your architecture or your product. A situation where finally you get that little idea, you say, this is why people use this feature. If we change this, it will make their lives better. This is what the market is doing. This is why people leave the site. This is why people come to the site. This is why this service is slow or why it's been unstable, or this is why this technology works or doesn't work. And once you achieve those moments of understanding, which can often be quite small, a simple idea, then it opens up all these new opportunities to you. The other way that the epiphany differs is the epiphany will often occur amidst or afterwards one of the other moments. You'll be in a crisis and have that quick epiphany to get you out of the crisis, and then realize as you sit down afterwards and kind of have a cup of tea and catch your breath, you're like, oh, we can apply this actually everywhere in the site. This isn't just this one situation. It's that epiphany that happens when you stop and reflect on what had happened. Or as you're forcing yourself to think differently and to challenge your assumptions while testing out or while facing the challenge and testing your hypothesis, you could have that epiphany that, again, is applicable more widely. And this was the case for me, really, when I think about my first moment of truth. My first digital moment of truth, really, was at the startup that I worked at in the late 90s, early 2000s. And this was like your classic late 90s startup, right? It was a bunch of people fresh out of college who had no idea what we were doing. One of them, by the way, is sitting in the front row here with me today. And we used our extreme kind of ineptitude to turn into optimism, into doing things that probably sane people wouldn't try to do. But we always felt like we were just one deal short of like if we just could land that big customer, like this company would be a success. Until we landed that big customer, and it immediately exploded. We went live with a major US carrier at midnight and a switchover from old vendor to us. By 4 a.m., as people started to wake up on the East Coast, the site was in flames. It didn't recover for about a month. We had to pull our testing environment out of the office. We went to our backup standby site, ripped all the hardware out of that. We took our staging environment, just loaded it all into the data center. We redirected trucks via some possibly shady deals with our vendors to get hardware ahead of schedule. And we finally got this thing live. It never really ran well. Like that whole kind of following year, it was always just right on the edge. This is the kind of project, if you've been unlucky, you've been on one, where your operations team has to stagger when they go home from work because you don't want to have too many people commuting at the same time because that's when the site will go down. Like if you were carrying the pager, you couldn't go out to dinner or go to a movie. You didn't need an alarm clock because you knew you were going to be up at 4 a.m. when the batch jobs ran. Like it was brutal, and we tried. Like we really put a lot of energy into trying to fix this, just like week after week. The whole development team, the operations team, we were all behind this, and we just couldn't get anywhere until we had one of our engineers came to me and said, "Have you heard about this company Wiley?" There's some kind of Canadian mad scientist, Lou Cerny, who's figured out a way to attach a profiler to your production instances with a low enough overhead that you can run it in production. And we're like, I'll try anything at this point. And so we brought him in, and got everything set up, turned it live. Day one, visibility into your app is a whole different thing. The first day we had APM functionality on this app, we immediately see that we are allocating essentially like gigabytes of objects at every single transaction because of the way the references were working, and then just throwing them away. And we had all these synchronous integration points, and just kind of went through and eliminated these issues one at a time, and suddenly it started to actually run, and not just mostly run. And so that shift from a year of crisis into a running system because of visibility is what drove my epiphany on this. And my epiphany was that we had been doing monitoring wrong. We were really proud of our monitoring going into this. I had what I considered to be the best monitoring systems in the industry. We had a baroquely complicated cacti setup, for those of you who lived through the early 2000s. A Nagios configuration that was auto-generated off of like our host inventory, like tens of thousands of checks, I suspect. If a bug walked across like an Ethernet cord, someone was going to get a page. Like we had this thing tuned. And we had this beautiful source of truth. We had the money chart. And the money chart told us how much we were selling. And almost anything you do wrong in an e-commerce site is going to affect that. Did you break search? Oh boy, that went down all of a sudden. Better figure out why. Did you push a bunch of busted links or bad assets in the last build? Did you slow the site down? Did you break the payment processor? All of these things would turn up in these kind of, technical causes, but the most important thing for us was that business cause was front and center. But despite having all of this, we couldn't fix the problem because we didn't actually know what the problem was. We just knew that there was a problem. And so realizing that my view kind of as an operations person was incomplete was what drove my real epiphany there about monitoring, which is that it's not only enough to know what has happened, but you have to know why it happened. Oops. And we can look at this here, the epiphany, it appeared following a crisis. It was a long crisis, but it was really something that was about the way we resolved it. It was by bringing a new idea bringing, in this case, a vendor, but is somebody who had a different way of looking at the world. And let me think about the things that I had been doing in a different way. And so I went on to my next company, and we were a Ruby on Rails shop, and so we called up, it's the company that had saved our bacon in the previous place, and they said, well, no, we don't deal with Ruby on Rails, but Lou has left, and he's gone off to form this new company, and you should look at them. And so we brought them in, and that was my first New Relic experience. And it proceeded to save my bacon in that company, too. And so years later, when I decided to leave the mobile industry, kind of that I was sick of selling ringtones, as lucrative as a business as ringtones sound like they will be, the problem was, while I had sold possibly millions of ringtones in my career, I had never bought a single one. I didn't need a ringtone. My phone rings by itself out of the box. I wanted to work somewhere that made a product that I needed and that people like me needed and that helped somebody and helped them do something other than just spend money. And so when I went looking for a place to work, I went to New Relic. And so in 2010, I joined New Relic. And it's been, 7 years of shipping lots of fun features, working with great people. But most importantly, it's about giving people outside of our company a product that you use to do great things. Because the proof of the work that we do isn't just that, it was fun to write. It's that it actually helps you. With, 15,000 customers, we've always got something interesting going on for one of you, for our customers. You're trying to reach that challenge or to face that crisis. You're having your own epiphanies. And that when we're there supporting you in your moments of truth, that's what lets us stand up here on stage and have fun and just love working here. And so I want to thank you for trusting us in your moments of truth. And I look forward to the rest of the day being able to introduce some of our customers who are coming up here as speakers and sharing how they've faced their moments of truth. Thank you. Now, we do have a little bit of time at the end for questions. And so we're not going to pass a mic around today here in the room. I'll repeat the question for anybody who would like to ask me something, either about those terrible stories or New Relic in general. I'll do my best to be honest, although I think that I do have people from our marketing department in the room who may jump on me. So, Diane says she won't? No. What are your questions?
What other features are hidden today in the product?
The question is, what other features are hidden today in the product? I would be up here a long time if I told you. We've taken from the Insights launch, which was our most spectacularly successful dark launch, we've really tried to do that more and more often. And so today we have probably 100 or 200 features which are in early phases of deployment. And they might be visible only to New Relic employees, and they might stay visible only to New Relic employees if they never show business value. Like, something that we've done even before that Insights launch, actually, is we would put features into the agents that would be shipped out to customers with no way for customers to see the data in visualizations. And that would let us test out the data ingest side for a while and make sure that when we turned that feature live on stage, when you went to it, hey, I already have 30 days worth of data visible. Yeah, that's because that agent went to you 6 months ago, right? It's that there's a constant progression at New Relic between the kind of internal development, kind of like NR only, early access customers, and so on, and just trying to expand visibility on each of our features as they mature. The question is, who monitors the monitor? This is a hotly debated philosophical issue. What we have is we have a separate instance of our full stack, which we also use for staging, and that it is the monitoring destination for our production environment. And so this is part of that maturation life cycle. So the very first versions of an agent go to our production environments that then send their data back to our staging environment so that we can test the smaller scale data flow and start to look at is the data useful to our own teams? And so you'll see this again with a lot of our products, is that the proving ground for a feature or an agent is this something that we ourselves will use day to day? Is this going to make our lives better? If it is, then we start trying to push a little bit further out. Is New Relic working on any custom hardware? I can say pretty definitively no. We are hybrid hosted, partially in public cloud for workloads where we really prize that kind of iteration of the full architecture. So when we don't know yet what we're working on, and then in our data centers where we're looking for that predictable performance. Once the architecture is gelled a little bit, we roll it back into the data center. If it is performance critical or needs access to our very large kind of data sets so that we can run the queries directly on the data. One of the things we discovered going through that iteration on the Insights product is that it was hopelessly inefficient to ship the data to processing nodes because we were doing an unindexed scan of billions of entries. And so by the time you've shipped it all to a query node, you've done all the work. And so our queries that are run against that are actually run on the nodes that store the data. We have a bring kind of compute to data approach. Unfortunately, this means that at least some part of the system needs to be physically where that is. And so you'll see as we've expanded into multiple data centers that we've built a low latency ring between those so that your individual query will be fanned out to all those data centers and have then the results merged. But then the jump between that and public cloud is a higher latency jump, something like a 10 or 20 milliseconds. And so we avoid that for those kind of internal queries. That's kind of a rambly answer to a question about hosting, but. How custom is the custom database stack? Custom. Like the NRDB is something that is written, like I said, essentially from scratch. It's a large, almost entirely Java application, but yeah, it's not built on any open source base. It has metadata storage using traditional databases, so places where relational data makes sense or we need caching. We're going to use, we have Zookeepers and Redis and MySQL and all of those things that are in its kind of ecosystem, but the database itself, all the way down to the file format, is custom. And then there were two other questions here in this section. Sir?
What other architecture or future enhancements are you looking to make to the platform that we would see from an eventual end user perspective?
What architecture enhancements are we looking to make that end users will see? Boy, I should check how much, I should have saved more time for this one. I think the most interesting things that we're doing right now are around streaming and extensibility. We've moved over the last 5 years to a really stream-oriented architecture. So instead of being calls come in over the internet and they are processed synchronously into a database, it's really about rapidly capturing them, placing them on a message bus. For us, it's Kafka, and then enriching the data as it moves through it phase by phase. So this way, we avoid lots of round trips to our state databases. You just kind of keep building on the message. So for instance, when those transaction events come to us, the first thing that happens is we make sure your license key is legit, and if so, then we put it on a bus. No other processing. Then we take it and we make sure the formatting is good, turn it into structured data. Then we take that and we look up your application data and stitch the names, the extra decoration on it, and we kind of flow it through all the way through to the point where when it's being alerted on, the alert evaluation system is actually receiving not just a timed snapshot of that one eval, but if you're evaluating a 3-minute debounce or something, there are actually 3 samples in that message so that the final alert evaluator doesn't have to make a historical lookup. It can actually perform that evaluation in a stateless manner. So we've done an internal transformation to streaming, but we haven't changed our public-facing APIs to streaming. Most of our APIs that we expose to people, with the exception of the Insights event exporter pipeline, are all just call and wait. And so we really want to start giving our customers access to that stream data, whether it's by being able to give us snippets that can run in our query pipeline itself, or whether it's just subscribing to some filtered set of data. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. And in general, you're going to hear kind of both of these themes over the next few years of moving to more and more stream-oriented, and also trying to give our customers the ability to build useful and novel solutions on top of our APIs. So not just kind of recombine what we already have, but actually, build a totally new thing that we hadn't thought of. And so we have to just give you more powerful pieces to do so. And then there was in the back, yes.
Any plans for offering NRDB as its own database product, or is it even possible to
The question is there plans to offer NRDB as its own database? Not currently. It really takes advantage of the SaaS nature of it. We have operations team who can do a great job of running it. It scales, its queries are fanned out to a large number of nodes. And so it's not something that we could give to somebody to run on 10 nodes. It runs great on hundreds of nodes. It'll run greater on thousands of nodes. It's something that really benefits from multi-tenancy. And so I think it makes the most sense to offer that always in that SaaS model. Will we allow you to build arbitrary applications on top of NRDB in the future? Possibly. To use it as a more general purpose data store, that's a possibility that we've explored a little bit, but so far, like I said, we haven't gotten to where it's like a slam dunk business value for our customers. Once we kind of figure that puzzle out, then we would want to expose it to you. And oops.
Mine's more on the client side of my problem. Is there any plans for data centers where they say don't have access to the internet and have to go through a proxy server to come up with some sort of HA queuing system where all the agents could report to instead of going through a proxy server?
Okay.
Is that on the roadmap, or
So this is a question about if you have isolated data centers, instead of connecting you're connecting out to the internet and to us via proxy, and wondering about a more protocol sensitive proxy for New Relic specific queuing.
or just a mesh network of sorts where all the agents discover each other and they all combine the messaging into 1-2-minute burst of magic.
So we've looked at a couple of different options here. We've settled on really just relying on the HTTP spec for the most part, and so we want to have, and I believe we do have, really good full-featured support for HTTP proxies, including making plain text connections to your proxy where you can perform auditing to make sure that we're not exfiltrating data for your DLP systems. And then making an encrypted connection back to us from the proxy. Right now, that's our recommendation. We've looked at solutions like this in the past, and very early on, right after I joined the company, in fact, there was consideration of taking our data collector and turning it into a local collector for bandwidth reasons. But the way that the world has continued to evolve, that's never kind of crossed the line. So I wouldn't rule it out, but it's not something that we're currently actively doing. It's always kind of in that like adjacency area. Diane, how are we for time?
We're at the end. However, we've got 15 minutes between sessions, so if you're up for it, you could still take a couple more questions. But if you're leaving to go to another session, you should leave now. So if you're staying, and we want you to stay.
And if you have later questions for me or comments or complaints, there's Twitter. I hear it's a great format for complaining. Okay, let me. Oh, the question of how much of our kind of internal team is working on NRDB. I can't give numbers or ratios for kind of, to be too specific on that, but it's not that much. I mean, it's really like, it's a few small teams, frankly. Most of our product development org remains focused on building product features. And so we have I consider it relatively small platform and site engineering org for the overall size, and that they're able to really support that through just like good tooling and that tight abstractions. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I'm a product manager for Relic. It's not only the people working in NRDB itself, but every product we have is working on how do we better leverage insights for that product.
Yeah, but that's a lot of the effort in this is in how the consuming teams use the features. We've tried to expose, kind of taking the page from Amazon's book, we have an API. It's a good API. There's some documentation. There's a team who stands by it, and they provided SLAs. And as long as you use this, you're in good shape. And so then this shifts some of the problem solving into those client teams. And so the development velocity that we have around this is protected by the fact that we don't have 50 people trying to solve the same problem. We have people who are really focused on their particular problems and how do we use the technology that exists today.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you, Nick.
Oh, thank you.